This is our first series titled Empowering Gnome Contributors. And the aim of this series is we want to ensure that beyond just contributing, that contributors are also putting themselves out there and leveraging the benefits and advantages of contributing to open source. So to kickstart this series, we're going to be kickstarting this series rather with this session titled Recognizing Your Value as a Contributor in the Open Source Ecosystem. And with us today is an amazing lady. She's the director at Gnome Foundation Board, and her name is Regina Nkenchor. Please, a round of applause for her. To, to give you a round of applause, just kindly react with your favorite emoji. I'm going to be bringing up Regina. Hello, Regina. Kindly confirm that you can hear me.
Hi, Phoebe. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and
Okay.
clear. Okay, so just kindly, I know I already did like a little introduction about you, so I'm guessing I might have missed out on some things. So just kindly introduce yourself, tell us what you do.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for having me on this space. So my name is Regina Nkenchor. I'm a Nigerian, but not based in Nigeria at the moment. I'm based in Sweden. I am currently a director at the GNOME Foundation Board, currently serving as the board vice president. Um, what else? I work as a software engineer by day. I'm also a founder of a nonprofit, Open Kids Africa. Um, I think that this summarizes everything I am at the moment, except possibly if there's other things that you'd want to know.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing with us, Regina. Okay, so I'm going to start with this question, which I'll be asking all the speakers that would come on any of our spaces.
Mm.
So, what inspired you to become like an open source contributor, and how has your journey evolved over time?
I think that I will start by saying that I was an open source user um, at the early stage of my career, but I didn't understand that the concept. I didn't understand the concept of open source at the time. So I, at a point in my career, I had an opportunity to lecture as a lecturer, and I was basically taking courses in Linux administration and database administration as well. Part of those courses require that I teach students how to use Linux tools, and most of the Linux tools were basically open source, but I didn't understand the concept at the time. So I got more like fascinated with the desktop on the Linux OS, and so I had been, more like wishing to understand more about how desktop application within Linux operating system was basically built, right? Um, so I think that was, I can't remember the exact year right now, but I just had more like a New Year resolution to do something different that particular year. And I stumbled on a Linux desktop user group. So I was very excited. That's mainly because I had been working with Linux in my career at the time. Um, and they needed some sort of volunteers for an event that was supposed to happen in Spain. That was the first time I decided to volunteer, and that's mainly because I just saw Linux desktop OS, and because I've been using free Linux desktop as part of my tools, I just joined, and I emailed the particular lady that I would like to volunteer for that particular event. And basically, that's how my journey started. Then I came to find out that at the time that particular event was co sponsored by GNOME and the KDE Foundation. And these two organizations are Linux, free Linux desktop organizations. So that's basically how my journey started. I think I would say, fortunately, the lady that I spoke to is was friendly, and she was within the GNOME Foundation board at the time. So I decided to join in and found out that every tool I had been using to lecture at the time were open source. So I had been using open source tool, but I didn't really understand the concept at the time. So I was excited, and because Linux Desktop was something that I really wanted to be part of, I just joined in, and I started contributing to GNOME. So taking the part, how did it evolve over time? So I started mainly by understanding what the community was about and where I could really contribute my time. And then I was lecturing, and I know that I wouldn't have the time to contribute to code. So I basically asked about other ways to contribute to become more like a contributor in the GNOME Foundation. And I found that they had other ways like engagement, which basically was about user outreach and event creation. That sounded really good to me because that's not something I would do originally. Like I really don't know how to host events or even speak to user groups of a particular product. And I felt like that's something that I want to learn at the time. So I basically started hosting events, joining to host events within the GNOME Foundation, GUADEC, and all of that. And so it evolved into, I realized that there were no Africans within the GNOME Foundation at the time. They had about two Africans that I was introduced to, but they were not really active, and they gave their own concerns as well at the time. And so I took it up upon myself to basically establish a GNOME chapter within the African space and begin to build the community the best way I can. So then that's evolved into, picking up leadership role and basically being at the forefront to see that GNOME has some level of presence within the African space. And from there, I was fortunate enough to um, apply for the GNOME board. I think this is my second time on the GNOME board, so my second time. So I applied for the first time, and I was elected as the first African um, in over 22 years of GNOME on the board. And that's basically evolved into the GNOME Foundation, changing few things like adding stuffs like diverse into their theme, just to show that we are looking for diversity. And that also advanced into a whole lot of things, beginning to look into what Africa can do within the GNOME space. So it has been quite a lot of journey. But mainly it basically started as just me wanting to learn about engagement and how I could improve my skills in a way that I would not originally do within user groups and outreach and event creation. Yeah.
Wow, it's been an amazing and an impressive journey. Well done, Regina. Well done. So
Thank
I
you.
read something, and what struck me most about that article was the part where it said one way to contribute to open source is to be a great user of open source products. And it's really great to know that you started out your open source journey as a user of an open source product. So it's really impressive and inspiring.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go down to the basis of this topic, recognizing your value as a contributor, right?
Yes.
So how do you define the value of open source contributions, and why do you think like it's really important that we open source contributors like recognize this value?
I think that the whole concept first of open source is one thing that a contributor should know about. What is the whole concept of open source? What does it mean to be an open source contributor? I think it's important that you know that first, being an open source contributor means that you are going to be helping to promote innovation, um, knowledge sharing, and community collaboration within the products that you are engaging in. So if you understand first the whole idea of open source and what it brings to the table, not to you first, but to the open source ecosystem, you could from there begin to pick out your own value. So if you understand that contributing to open source is contributing to something bigger than yourself, you're contributing to an ecosystem where that would drive more innovation within the open source ecosystem, that would drive people to learn more about different tools to be able to perform their everyday tasks and build more creative software. You would begin to find your own niche and where you would be valuable. So I will give an example of myself. Like I said, I started using Linux as a lecturer at the time before even becoming right? An open before even becoming a contributor at the GNOME project. So by the time I got to the GNOME project and I understood that what I had been doing was that I was a user, I'm not necessarily new. It helped me to basically find where I would be valuable and found where my interest to be more appreciated. So if you understand the concept and understanding that being a user of the open source tool first makes you part of the ecosystem. So you are not necessarily like I see people feel like I want to contribute to open source and it seems as though, oh, I'm just new in open source. If you, like myself, was a user before you became a contributor, you would place yourself in a place where I have used this product for quite some time. I can contribute to XYZ of this product improvement. And in you contributing, then you are also helping, the knowledge share, whether even if it's documentation you are doing, whether you're creating an event, whatever it is that you're doing, you are aware of why you're doing it. And that way you would raise your head up high to know that you are doing something bigger than yourself. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Amazing. Thank you for sharing, Regina. Okay, so this leads me to my next question. So, as a newcomer, right, I think if there is something that most new contributors face, and I also did face that, like when I started with contributing to NOM, like was that imposter syndrome. Do you get?
Mm.
So, how do you think that as a newcomer, like we can overcome this imposter syndrome and start recognizing the value that we bring to open source projects?
I think, well, let me first say thank you for the question, because I think the concept of imposter syndrome comes first from you not basically knowing who you are, and that's where value comes in. That's where understanding what open source is comes in, and that's where you begin to drill down into your personality. So, for instance, if you know what open source is about first, that it is bigger than what you think of yourself, that it is you putting in your time, right, into something that is going to basically impact a particular product and in turn impact the user group of that product globally. You would see that when you begin to contribute, you would see yourself as a valuable entity to that project. And over time, imposter syndrome will begin to drop. Now, one thing I feel like what happens when it comes to imposter syndrome, and I know that I've had cases and unique stories, but first you need to understand the concept of open source. Second, you need to understand, why am I here, what am I going to be doing here? And then thirdly, you need to spell out your goals. What do you want to achieve in this particular community that you are contributing to? So for me at the time, like I said, I'm able to remain in the GNOME project because I was clear from the beginning what I want to do within the GNOME project, and it hasn't changed. If you look at everything I've been doing over time, it has been within engagement, user outreach, community. I have not done, let me say, anything different from this. And so if I'm asked to talk about my contributions, I don't have to write it down. I know what I've done. I know when I did them. I know the year I did them. So because of this, I can give a story that would be impactful because I'm aware of what I'm doing and I understand that the value that I'm bringing into that particular community. So I think that imposter syndrome will begin to basically die gradually if you understand what you're doing in that community, why you're in that community, and what it transcends to the overall open source ecosystem. You would, over time begin to find yourself more um, valuable in the open source ecosystem and the community that you're contributing to as well.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing, Regina. Okay, so this leads me rather to my next question, right? So in your view, how do you think that open source contributors can better communicate the value of their work to both like the open source community and to potential employers? Because I think if there is one thing too that a lot of open source contributors face is not knowing how to even include their work experience in their CV or their portfolio, like their work experience, like in the open source space. They're like scared of, okay, have I really, like, does this contribution count and all of that? So how do you think that they can better communicate the value of their work to like open source community and also to potential employers?
Well, I think that first it still goes back to the path where I said before going into any project that you want to contribute to, you need to understand the whys. Why am I doing this in the first place? See, if you understand why you are doing a thing, you can easily talk about it. So, apart from the fact that there's GitHub, there's LinkedIn, and there's Twitter that you can share your story about the things you've done, right? And you can write about it and you can showcase your portfolio as well. You would come to a point in any interview space where you would need to speak about the things you've done. You will need to speak about how you've been able to bring more like value into that particular thing that you are doing, and the holistic view of what you have done. So it's basically around you being able to, cut, give yourself a time to understand, why am I here, what am I doing here, and what have I learned here, and what am I learning. So if you're able to have a metrics of the things you've learned, what you're learning, and what you want to learn, you can easily talk about it. You can easily, share your portfolio and be, brave enough to discuss about what your portfolio is and how you've been able to transit a particular project from A to Z, or from A to B, depending on what you've done. So for instance, like I started as more like someone that just wanted to contribute to a Linux desktop ecosystem. I wanted to be part of the Linux desktop ecosystem, and I wanted to see that we have more people within not just people within Europe and US contribute to it, because diverse design also has a lot to tell about how a UI interface is, right? I wanted to see that Africans were also giving in their own contribution to the GNOME project. Because I knew what I wanted to do, I tilted my contribution around where I would talk about it, and possibly over time bring in people that would begin to do code development and all of that within the Linux, the GNOME shell rather. So now if I'm asked to talk about this, I can talk about it. Why? Because I understand what I wanted to do. I understand why I'm doing it, and I understand what my contribution have done to the, not just within the Linux desktop ecosystem, but within the GNOME project as well. So it still drills down to your whys and knowing what you want to learn, what you are learning, and what you would still learn, and being able to effectively tell your story in the platforms that you have, and share your portfolios as well.
Amazing. Understanding your whys. Interesting. Thank you for sharing with us, Regina. Like that was really something I took out. That before you come into like any open source project, you must first understand your reason for being there. Like why do you want to contribute to that project? And that is basically what will help us like transcend into becoming better contributors and helping us effectively like tell our stories and communicate the value that we bring. Thank you so much. So if you're just joining us, I can see new faces. I can see Vala and also Tech Babe. I can also see Zara. Thank you guys for joining us. We are talking about recognizing the value contributors bring to the open source ecosystem. Okay, so Regina, this leads me to my next question. Yeah, because I know that every road is definitely paved with challenges. Yeah. So, what are the challenges that you faced as an open source contributor, and how have these challenges contributed to your growth and recognition, like in the open source ecosystem?
Thank you so much for that question. I think one of the challenges I faced was being able to communicate my pain points um, as someone from African descent in a foundation where there had not been people like myself there for so long. Um, it was draining at the time. That's to be sincere, because um, it's a different thing when you are in a community that is diverse from the beginning. There's a different story. Then you have people like yourself. Then you can communicate your pain points a bit more clearly, and possibly people like yourself will understand you. But in my case, I was bringing in a community that had never been in Africa, and I was being also acting as a leader as well at the time. And I needed to make them see that there is a gap here, and this, we need to fix this gap. So it was quite, let me use the word frustrating at the beginning, because I felt like I wasn't being heard. But as I began to evolve in that particular community, that's the GROWN project, I began to learn more about effective communication, and that there are different ways that you can communicate your pains in a way that the next party will understand. And if you are, for instance, from Nigeria or maybe in Africa, you would understand that there are certain perceptions that are around Africans, that people would think that when you're trying to communicate your pain, you might come off as maybe you are being even aggressive when you are just actually just explaining stuffs. So I had to learn, because I'm now speaking to people that are not they're not within African descent. I had to learn how to, you know, if I try to communicate with you verbally and you don't understand it, I send a message, I explain myself a bit more, I bring forth reasons. So one of the things I did was, when I realized that I was finding it difficult to communicate my pains within the GNOME Foundation, I began to do research, and within the community. I took surveys, I asked questions within the user group in the community, and I presented to the board that, look, this is the metrics of what we are having. We are not diverse in this community, and we need to do something about it. And immediately they saw the data presentation, they began to tilt towards the things I was talking about, and they began to see, how can we make changes, how can we bring in more people. So it's basically communicating my pain points is one of the challenges I face, but that basically also helped me to be a better communicator. And these are other skills you can actually gain as well from being an open, contributing to open source, because you get to speak to different people from diverse places, and you get to learn how to effectively communicate with them. So now it's a different story now, because I have been able to learn how to channel my pain into gains, in a way that it brings forth good result for me at the end of the day. And I think the other challenge I faced was mainly, I would use the word imposter syndrome at the beginning, because, like I said, I came in at a time when there were no Africans within the GNOME Foundation. There were so many, things going on in the community at the time. But as I began to grow and I understood, especially when I got voted for the first time, I more like channeled my energy into bringing in my best to the community, and just keeping aside the things that were not necessary. I call them not necessary because they were not really emotionally affecting me at the time. I felt like I could still thrive in the community, and just putting those things aside. And I would say that these two areas, basically, yeah, I was able to look at where my problems was coming from and if they were avoidable. So this is the community themselves, um, and some other people would have issues with people from people like myself coming into this kind of space. But being in the leadership position more like gave me a leverage, because um, we get to make the rules, we get to decide on what needs to be done. And as long as people within the leadership position values my contribution, somehow, over time, the user group will come along. So I mean, like, I shifted my focus from what was the problem to how I can solve the problem. And that's changed a lot of things over time, even up until date.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing, Regina. I think I totally agree with the part where you said something about like being able to effectively communicate, because this same issue of communication was what hindered my contributions when I wanted to contribute to Chaos Africa. Like, I got into the community, I was scared. Okay, what if I reach out to this person and I get ignored and all of that? But then when I took the bull by the horn and I joined the GNOME community, I told myself, okay, I was going to like eliminate this issue of fear, like wanting to reach out. And immediately I reached out, I got a positive response, and that was how I started leading like the Gnome Africa community, just by reaching out and effectively communicating what I wanted to do. And that was it. So thank you for sharing, Regina. Like, that was really insightful. So this leads me to my second to last question because I currently have a timer on and we are 5 minutes ahead. Okay. So you know at the beginning you said something about effective storytelling and that caught my attention. So this leads me to the question I want to ask you now. What strategies did you like put in place to communicate and promote your open source contributions? And how has that helped you gain recognition within the ecosystem?
I think that, and thanks for that question. I think now is even more better. Let me use the word now is more better because now there's, after during 2020 COVID, the whole rise in storytelling and all of that, it really, really improved. But when I basically started my own open source contribution, it was mainly within the GNOME foundation um, tools that I basically use to tell my story. So I use the Discourse channel, and I also use GitLab as well to basically make my contribution. And I wasn't really doing much around other platforms, maybe not so much on LinkedIn, right? But now it's a different ball game here as to when I started. It's a different ball game. And another thing is that the GNOME project, I would say, is some sort of a unique project where the user groups are not on, popular social media platforms. So, for instance, you might be a GNOME contributor and be active on Twitter, and you might not actually be seen because the user groups are within the channels, the metrics channels. The user group are within the discourse channels. So many of them are not coming out into, popular platforms. So I would say first understand the project that you are contributing to, number one, and leverage the tools that you know they use to basically raise your contribution. If you have done anything, go into their channels, talk about it, ask questions, be known. And don't assume that every contributor is on Twitter or every contributor is on LinkedIn. You need to understand your project's your project's communication channels and use them effectively. Now that's the part one. The part two is now bringing out those things that you have done out into the global channels, like the most popular channels like LinkedIn, like Twitter, like writing a blog post on Medium. So you have to do this too, hand in hand, so that, just for example, if a recruiter sees your work and you say, for example, oh, I'm contributing to the GNOME project, and they try to discuss with somebody within the community that is not on Twitter, for instance, somehow your name will ring a bell because you have been, contributing within the community itself, right? That is another thing I think we should it's important for us to do. So I'll give an example. When I started first within the GNOME, and these were just the things I did, always communicating in the metrics channel, always giving my contribution there. When I decided to come out for the board for the first time, I was shocked at the people that voted. That's mainly because I didn't expect that so many people knew that I existed like that. So it's important that you understand your community channel, use them effectively, and then come out to the global space as well. Yeah.
Very insightful. Thank you for sharing, Regina. So if there's one thing that I picked up from what you said, like being able to like communicate, communication is really an important skill that I feel like every open source contributor should have and should learn. Being able to effectively, like both verbally and, you know, communicate what you're doing, like put it out there, go on the platforms, like she said, you need to be able to recognize the main platform that most of those community members are in. Go there, put out what you do, like just basically storytelling, putting out yourself out there. Thank you for sharing, Regina. So this leads me to my last question, right? Um, I know that open source can be like if it's not even it can like open source is a life-changing journey. So what advice would you give to newcomers who are just like beginning to contribute to open source projects and may not fully recognize their potential?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think the advice I would give is basically um, an advice I would give to myself if I were to start today, right? I would say that it's just um, try to take a step back to understand why you're doing what you're doing. See, I've seen cases where people have done so many things, but they can't even talk about the things they've done because this ability to take a step back to understand why you are doing was not there at the beginning. And it's always good to go with the flow, like go with something that is trending. But I would say go with something that is trending with your head straight, right? So if open source contribution is trending and you want to be part of it, you need to be aware what you are part of. You can't jump into an ocean and start looking for a life jacket when you're in the ocean already. You will drown, right? But if you look for a life jacket and more like make provision for a life jacket before you jump into the ocean, tendencies that you would float, right? You would not be missing. So first thing is try to understand, okay, open source is trending and I want to be part of this open source thing itself. What is open source? Why am I doing it? Is this really something I want to do? That's number one. Number two, what do I want to learn in this open source thing? Is there something that I would like to do that I would, that I want to learn? Number two, you think that, where would I like to learn this thing? So if you want to learn about community building, you want to learn about developing your code skill, right? Which project can I contribute to that would enhance this particular gap that I have in my knowledge that I want to learn rather more on? Now, when you put that in place, then you go into the community and you begin to, try to observe the community, reach out to people, look for the newcomers channel for that community, introduce yourself. My name is so I'm from here and I would like to join this community. Please, are there other things I'd like to know? Go to their website, read more about getting involved and what it takes for you to be a newcomer and who to reach out to. The good thing about open source communities is that their names are like very spelled out and you can search them out on the internet. If they are open on LinkedIn, reach out. I'd love to contribute to this, community and I lack XYZ knowledge. Please help me out. And that's basically how you start. And then always, I would say, challenge yourself to tick the things you've learned, maybe on a monthly basis or even quarterly, because if you put this down and you intentionally put them down, if you would speak to anybody, even if it's subconsciously, you would find yourself saying the things you've done and they will be amazed, right? And also, of course, you would have an evidence for it. So and evidence is important. Evidence is your portfolio. That's very important. Evidence is the activities, the stories you are telling, but it also boils down to you, I would say, really take time out, take a step back to really understand why do you want to do this. Another thing I think that I would say is, if you're coming into open source and you have a full-time job and you want to use that to basically increase your, maybe your financial status, or you want to use that to increase your skill, whatever it is, you have to know how to prioritize effectively. How can you prioritize in a way that you would not affect your full-time job while you're still contributing and making the value, the impact that you want to basically make in that particular project or in that particular community. So it's very, very important that you put all of this down intentionally, and also bring yourself to a place of knowledge enough for the things that you are doing, for the things that you want to do, and how you would eventually do them. Yeah, I think that's it.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Regina, for sharing. Like, it's really been an insightful session so far. Thank you so much. I think when I joined Nome Africa, yeah, one of the things that I told myself that I wanted to do was to increase my capacity in the area of managing open source communities, because this was like totally a new space to me. And guys, I can tell you that since I started like this journey into managing the Nome Africa community. It has really helped me improve my communication skill, the way that I collaborate with other people, and like these are like just the few tangible benefits that you can gain from being actively involved in the open source ecosystem. So thank you so much, Regina, because Regina right here, she made me coming into Gnome, she made it very seamless for me. And I was able to just reach out to her and she responded immediately. So the part where she said, like being able to like communicate and reach out is really an important factor if you want to get started in contributing to any open source project, like really important. So this is the part where I open the floor to you, our amazing participants, to like come on stage. If you have like any burning questions, this is the time where you can just grab the mic and also ask. And if you also want me to do you the honors of asking the questions on your behalf, just kindly drop it in the comment box section and it will be a pleasure for me to do it on your behalf. So this session is supposed to run for 10 minutes. Yeah, so I'll be waiting for mic requests and also checking the comment box section to see if there is any message. So I'm just waiting. You can just grab the mic and come on stage to ask your question. I can also see new faces in the house. Hello, Samson. Hello, Tedri. Hello, Nna Emeka. Knowledgeable, Gear, and Josh. You guys are welcome. Thank you guys so much for joining in. So I have a request from Chekube Peters. So I'm just going to go on ahead and approve. Hello, Chekube, kindly confirm that you can hear me. Hello, Chekube, can you hear me?
Yeah, sure, I can hear you. Good
Oh,
evening,
awesome.
everybody.
So yeah, good evening. So just kindly introduce yourself, tell us what you do, and then go ahead to ask your question. Thank
Okay.
you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Chekube Peters. I'm a designer. Okay, so I'm also part of the Genome Africa volunteer team. I'm the design lead. So this is for the interest of those that has been asking me, how does open source give us benefits or something, like what does one gain to be part of open source. So I'm really curious to ask Regina about this. Okay, so is there any physical, or should I say material or payment for being part of open source? Because people has been asking me this question, and trying to explain it to them my own way has been, should I say, it has been fruitless. It does not yield any fruit of convincing them about open source. So I don't know if you can throw light on that. The things you gain for participating in open source.
Okay. As at the time when I started, and thank God there are other people here. Um, I started as a volunteer at first, and so basically my gains were basically um, not financial at the time. But as I began to progress, I had other gains. Like for instance, if you're in the GNOME, if you contribute to GNOME, you eventually become a member. And if you're a GNOME member, you are your events. If you get to attend any events or you get to do anything within open source, will be taken care of by the GNOME Foundation Board. So you get to travel. That's one thing. And then you get to also, of course, improve your skills in the areas that you have decided that you want to improve your skills in. But now things has basically changed. Yeah, because now there are other programs like there's Outreachy, there's GSOC, there's Google Season of Dog. There are other hackathons that are going on that are even paid at the moment. So I would say that depending on what you are, the people you are connecting to, that will tell you how you can leverage these opportunities. So even within for instance, the GNOME project, there are areas like Outreachy, there's GSOC that is paid, right? And there's Google Season of Dog. And even right now, at the moment, we are working on a global program, which was um, which came out of the Oscar Fest that we are part of. Thank you to Samson. So that's basically that collaboration that we did is something that we are working on within GNOME, that we are now doing a global inclusive initiative where we want to basically bring the global GNOME community together and support them to be able to, do more outreach within the GNOME project. So there are other things that will come up within the GNOME project, but I would say that you should not limit yourself and confine yourself to not leverage other opportunities that you have out there within the open source ecosystem. That's why communities are important, getting involved and getting connected to, to other people. One of the things I'll say here that we are working on within GNOME Africa is to have more like a boot camp program where we could help Africans get into the GNOME GSOC, begin to work real time on the GNOME shell, and also outreaches. So openly, I would say that we get application for people from Africa for outreach within GNOME, but there is something that is lacking in those applications. That's like not so many people understand our code base within the GNOME shell and now to basically participate in GNOME. So we are planning to have more like a boot camp where we can show people our code base, and help you to understand how you can begin to contribute within the GNOME project. And this is basically why most applications that comes from Africa gets rejected, and that's mainly because there is no skills. So even right now, we have a project ongoing, which is basically that was approved within the German government for GNOME, and they are recruiting people for Linux, people that are able to do things on Linux desktop and all of that. And it's a whole lot of money. And I really would love Africans to be part of this particular stuff that we got. But, like I said, unfortunately, there is less skills within our space that understands basically how the GNOME shell works and how they can begin to work within the GNOME desktops and the infrastructure that we have, and which is basically what this funding covers. So because of this, we are working with the global community to see how we can help people within Africa and Asia to basically understand what we have at the back end of code and how you can begin to contribute to different of these tools. So I would take, for example, when we had the last event at Guadalajara, we had so many people that came from, I think, India, that basically did more on this particular last GSOC that happened. And most of them said they just came into GNOME for 3 months and they began to work within the back end, what we have at the back end, and made the application after 3 months and they were accepted. So we know the gaps now, and we are trying to see how we can create more space and opportunity for people to be able to become contributors of GNOME. But I would say don't also limit yourself. Connect to people and leverage opportunities that you find on the internet around open source. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
So Chekube, I hope your question was answered.
Yeah, sure. She did well in answering them. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Okay, so before we take the last question from Tech Babe, I can see some new faces in the house. You guys are welcome. Thank you for joining in. So we started a series called Empowering Open Source Contributors, and this is the first session that we're having. So our spaces are scheduled to hold bi-weekly every month, the first and third Thursday of every month. So you guys would be seeing more of us here on Twitter Spaces. Okay, so this is where I hand the mic over to Tech Babe. So just kindly introduce yourself, tell us what you do, and then go ahead to ask your question. Thank you.
Okay, hi everyone, good evening. Can everyone hear me?
Sure, we can hear you loud and clear.
Yeah, it's not a question, it's actually more like an appreciation to Regina. I just want to tell her thank you. Okay, first, I'm Faith Ninja, and I'm a front-end developer, a technical writer, and also a community manager. Now, we've been hearing of open source, open source, open source. In fact, I'm different open source community, but then I've not really gotten the reason why I'm really into open source. Of course, I know it's to contribute, right? But there was something Regina said. She talked about stepping back to nowhere, and that got me. And I just want to say thank you. Like, how do I put it now? Trying to know the metrics. That way, you'll be able to tell your story even better. So I just want to say thank you to Regina. Thank you so much. Thank you for this space.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing, Faith. Thank you so much for your feedback. Okay, so I think this is where we'd call it a stop on asking questions because it's currently 6:50 and we are very firm on ending the spaces in an hour, in rather 10 minutes time. Okay, so if you have like any insights that you want to share based on this topic, like you have any thoughts related to recognizing your value as an open source contributor, just kindly come, like just request for the mic and I'll bring you up on stage. So we'll just be taking the first person to request for the mic and then would summarize and call it a day. So is there anybody who wants to come on stage and share their thoughts? We are waiting. You can also use the comment box session to just drop and I would be pleased to read it out on your behalf. Okay, we have Ozzy. Hello, Ozzy. Kindly confirm that you can hear me. Hello, Ozzy. Can you hear me?
Hello everyone, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Ozzy. So just kindly go ahead, introduce yourself, tell us what you do, and then you can go ahead to share.
Okay, that's fantastic. Good evening everyone. My name is Ozzy from Nigeria and I'm happy to be here. My question um, is is for someone who wants to join an open source community, but the person has a smartphone. So, because you know that if you want to advocate for an open source project, you should be grounded with the use of the product. So this person has a smartphone and he desires to be part of open source ecosystem, but he doesn't have a PC. So is that possible for such person to join an open source project? Thank you.
Thank you for asking, Ozzy. So, Regina, do you want to take that? I also have something to share, like based on this question Ozzy asked. Hello, Regina. Can you hear
Oh
me?
yeah, you can share that first and then um yeah.
Okay. So, okay, thank you, Regina. So, Ozzy, based on what you said, like you have, or rather, the person has like just a smartphone and the person wants to like advocate for an open source community. So, I think that shouldn't even be like a limiting factor because one way you can even start advocating for any open source product is by talking about them. It could be on any of your social media handles, like just using your smartphone and writing about them, like, do you get? So that's even like one way to advocate. You necessarily do not need a laptop, even though that like if you have a laptop, it's fine, it's amazing. But that's one way you can start. So don't just limit yourself and take a pause because you do not have access to a system. You can start by like even giving them a shout out, talking about them, and finding ways that you can join the community and contribute. Even if though like, okay, for example, the work we do as community managers is something that you can just with the help of your smartphone. You necessarily do not need like big tech gears. Do you get? So that's one way you come in, moderate Twitter spaces for the community. Like these are just like few ways you can come in and start contributing. Then as time goes on and you have the resources to, purchase the system, then you can even now dive deeper into like main contributions. But in essence, I'm saying don't just take a pause or limit yourself because you do not have a system. Like, nah, don't do that. So Regina, kindly share.
Well, I think you've said it all. But I would say that I think if we genuinely ask most tech people that came out of our, let me say Nigeria for instance. I think most of us started with either a very, very bad laptop. When he was speaking, I was just thinking of my first laptop and how horrible it was, and how I would have to, have something hold on the flex so that the laptop can basically be okay for me to work with. And at the time I was even lecturing, so I didn't have like the best tools when I started, and that's basically why I would say I keep appreciating what open source has done, right? So why I feel that a laptop is important as well, there are other ways, other non-code ways you can communicate. So, and these channels have mobile platforms that you can go and basically ask questions and all of those things like that, and begin to make your contribution. And if you have an opportunity, right, to get a laptop, don't be carried away with a very big and expensive laptop. Start up with something that you can afford, that is usable, and begin to basically make your contributions. Yeah, like I said, when he was speaking, I was just thinking about my first and I was laughing at myself, like, but it's a different story. And I think many people have their stories about their first laptops, about how they started in tech and all of that. And create your own story, own your story, be happy about your own journey, and everything else will be beautiful.
Amazing. So, Ozzy, I hope that answered your question.
Yes, thank you so much. And one other thing that I forgot to mention is that I am part of NOM under community management, and it's been a great time doing some stuff here.
Amazing. Yes, Ozzy has been really instrumental, like in managing the North Africa community. So shout out to you, Ozzy. And also we have Chekube right here in the house for all the amazing designs that you see us put out here on Twitter, on LinkedIn. He he designs like all of that. So shout out to Chekube as well. Thank you guys so much for coming and making your own impact in your own little way and big way. So thank you guys so much. So I think this is where we call it a day. So Regina, is there anything like you would want to share, like in just 3 minutes?
Other than to say thank you, Phoebe, and everyone that's joined today, I would also say that you've been a very valuable addition to the GNOME community and the GNOME Africa community as well. And it seems as though I've known you like forever, although you stress me a lot, but I enjoy working with you, and you're very, very you are easy to work with. And thank you so much. Thank you, Chekube, for the designs. I was saying to Phoebe how beautiful your designs are, and being able to also adopt what we have within GNOME and working with the design person in the GNOME global community. That's a very good one. So thank you, Ozzy. Thank you, everyone that has basically joined this space to listen. And yeah, have a beautiful evening.
And also, if you want to get started with contributing to GNOME, just kindly go to our Twitter handle. You'll see our wiki page. It basically gives you all the information that you need with getting started. And also, don't be afraid of reaching out. You can just send us a message, or rather, even send me like a personal message. My handle is Ibifi Berestima. You can also send either Regina, Ozzy, or Chikube like a message, and ask them questions as to how you can get started. Yeah, and we'll be happy to see you contributing in our community. So, bye, guys.